So what is intrapersonal relationships? Or I should say communication. What is intrapersonal communication?
Did you say intra?
Intra, yep, not inter, intra.
Communication between yourself and, like, I guess your body too.
It's communication with yourself. How many of you are totally conscious about how much you talk to yourself? How many of you, when I signed this, when we started reading this, you were like, I'm talking to myself. That shit's for crazy people, right? And I think it's fascinating because we all have that inner dialogue, right? And what are some of the different ranges for that inner dialogue or that self-thought? I guess I'm curious, what are some common self-thoughts?
Crap.
What do you mean?
Oh shit.
Why?
You did something. I did something wrong and I realized it.
Okay. And so a self-critique?
Sure.
Yeah. What else? What's other?
Yeah, I do it to, like, not forget stuff.
Okay.
When I'm packing and stuff.
Yeah, so you sort of like go over in your head like the list so that you don't forget stuff? Yeah. So we've got like kind of information sorting, right? Checklists in your head.
When you say, like, talking to yourself, do you mean actually verbalizing it or whatever?
No, I just mean inner thought.
Okay.
I think body image is a huge one. I mean, think back over the years of your life. How many times you've had a thought, positive or negative, about the way you look, about what you're wearing, about what people are thinking about how you look. See that, right? Always, right? What are some other big things that I think we always have thoughts about? You know, what we're doing wrong, right? So that inner critique, body image, information sorting. How about perceptions of others? Do you have an inner monologue about perceptions of others? So where do we think that those inner thoughts come from?
Little voice in your head?
Yeah, who's running that little voice?
Like a rhino.
Is it you?
I hope.
So do we think that the inner voice is just you and only you?
Your conscience usually plays a role in that.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got consciousness, and I don't want to get too deep into that, but it's good to know, right? That sort of psychological id, what are the parts? Consciousness, subconsciousness, right? The stuff we know we're thinking, the stuff we don't even know that we're thinking, kind of thing. And to some extent, I think we have control over that. I mean, how many of you feel like you have pretty strong control of your inner thoughts? Yeah. But is it just us controlling them? No, so what's cool and weird and awesome about intrapersonal communication is that it's us doing the communicating and to ourselves, right? So we're having the communication and we're controlling it, but it's influenced by outside individuals. I think the body image one that, like Anne said, it's constant, right, is a great example of how, I mean, we're the ones having those thoughts about our bodies, but those are influenced by tons of things, right? Everything from our families, our parents, our friends who we grew up with, magazines, pop culture, TV shows. There's a movie called Misrepresentation where they interview a bunch of women leaders, and I believe it's Condoleezza Rice who says, they sort of ask her, like, did you plan to go into politics? Like, did you plan to do this? And have you ever seen Condoleezza Rice? She's a woman of color, and she says, no, like, I never planned any of this. I didn't even know this was a possibility. And they say, why? And she says, because I never saw anyone who looked like me doing it. Right? So, like, we have these inner monologues that we can control, but they're definitely influenced by the things we're taking in outside of this. So, do we think that the majority of our communication is positive or negative?
Both.
Or neutral? Yeah, both. And you think that's probably a good split?
Probably not.
How many of you, thinking back, right? Like if you were to categorize messages you send to yourself, do you think more of them are positive or more of them are negative, or is it pretty even split? Why is that?
I think the negative probably sticks more than positive.
Yeah. So maybe even if it was even, we just remember the negative more?
Yeah, well, I worked with customers before, and we had customer training.
Yeah.
There are like 10 people talking positive about your company. That equals like one person talking negative about it.
Yeah. So that's great, right? So even the value of value, right? I think y'all are hitting on something really important. Negative self-talk is totally socially acceptable. Think about it. As long as you're saying to yourself something to the effect of like, oh, I'm too fat, or oh, I'm not smart enough, or oh, I'm not going to do all this. I mean, I teach public speaking. Let me tell you, teaching a public speaking course is just an exercise in negative self-talk. Because everybody's totally fine telling themselves what a shitty speaker they are. Oh, I talk too fast. Oh, I'm bad at that. Oh, I'm not going to do that. And they'll say, oh, I'm so bad at public speaking. Say, how many public speeches have you ever given? 2. I did a class in high school. So you're telling me you've done 2 in your whole life and you're just bad at it. I'm bad at downhill skiing. Oh, do you downhill ski? No. That's why I'm bad at it. Right? Like, and being just incapable of connecting the work to that positive self-image. Right? It's just I'm bad, or I'm too this. I have a very clear memory of sitting at a lunch table in high school with Erin Johnson, and Erin Johnson weighed 135 pounds. I know that because she said it out loud. And I thought that was interesting because I weighed 135 pounds. We weighed exactly the same amount. And she said, and then she started making comments about how fat she was. We were both very tall, and she was making comments about negative self-comment. I mean, this wasn't intrapersonal. She was saying them out loud. And I remember thinking to myself, she's not fat because I'm not fat. And we weigh the same amount. That's logic. I'm not fat. So notice how we're linking all of these together at this point, right? So we've got self-concept, right? How am I? Am I fat? Am I thin? Connected to this idea of self-disclosure. Do I tell someone how much I weigh? Do I tell them my size? That kind of thing. Connected to that intrapersonal communication. And actually, this is deceiving. I'm going to put this over here because that intrapersonal is really connected to that self-concept. It is the birth. It is the first piece of communication. It's where everything starts, is that discussion that we have with ourselves. Take some time at your tables and try to apply this to either your life or friend. Like, give me some examples of this, because I've given you a lot of stories, and I think I'm a fantastic storyteller. But I want, thank you. See, Cody does too, I think, just a little. But I want some of your stories. Where do you see this happening in your life? Do you have a memory of the first time you really realized you were having that inner dialogue in your head? Or a moment where that really mattered? Maybe it wasn't the first time, but maybe it really mattered. Do you have a moment where where you realized your self-concept was different than someone else's and how that impacted that intrapersonal communication? Talk to your tables about it.